Okay,
Awesome. We're
so
live now.
can begin?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
thank you. Thanks, Bala, and Vishnu also. Hello, friends. A very happy new year. Have you given a thought as to what you would do in 2021 to make it a happy year for you? After all, being happy is pretty straightforward, right? Identify what makes you happy and do only that. But of course, there are practicalities of life, so let's modify it a bit. Identify what makes you happy and do more of that. Well, your educated mind is still not convinced. So let's make a framework. Sorry for that delay in the transition. So I'm from Lucknow, and so it's a plain area. There are no mountains, no beaches, no beautiful sunrises or sunsets. And if I had to think of a natural phenomenon which was beautiful, it would have been the night sky. So let me pick a speck from this night sky and use this star as our framework for happiness. So let's get started. Which table is longer? Any guesses?
The one on the left looks
A.
longer.
A, right? Yeah.
Depends on what you
Yeah.
call long. Are you
Okay.
They are
So
same.
this is what I call long. So which table is longer? Yeah. So some said A, some said are they the same?
they, they're probably the same.
Yeah. So let's find out. Turns out table B is longer than table A. And now a magic is about to happen. Tan-ta-dan! Now that the arrows have gone, table A is again longer than table B. It's as if we didn't learn anything in the past few seconds. Now over here, the more important thing is that even when, so of course, we generally say that, perceptions can be far away from reality, but the more important bit is that even when it was proved that our perception was incorrect, we have a hard time accepting this fact. Table A still seems longer than table B. And this is a pretty objective exercise where possibly the biggest emotion involved is you being right or wrong on a quiz. What if this was a more real life setting of complex social structure and subjective opinions? Now, over here, table B doesn't mind if you call it the shorter table. But what if this was a person? How would table B perceive you? And what if this table B was you? Now, I know it's a bit difficult to imagine. So let me tell you my life journey after KREC. So I started working in Bangalore after KREC, and in one of the calls with my father, he asked me a very pertinent question that both your parents are postgraduate and you are a graduate. How does it make you feel? Now, of course, being a postgraduate and all, he was expecting me to pursue my MTech. And this expectation from me sort of gave me the boost that for the first time in my life, I took a decision by myself. I knew GATE wasn't my cup of tea. And what I remembered from KREC days was that there is an exam called CAT where the syllabus is only till 10th standard. So that seemed a lot more easier to me. And that is what I decided to pursue. So that's how I ended up being in IIM Calcutta. Now, apart from the branding and other stuff from IIM, one thing that really affected me or has been with me for even till today is something called the momentary lapse of reason. So this was a section on our intranet where some random quotes were displayed. And one day when I logged in, I saw this quote which said, "A rational person adapts himself to the society. An irrational person expects the society to adapt to him. Alas, all the development in this world is dependent on the irrational person." Now, that was, an aha moment for me. The penny dropped or epiphany or whatever you call it, it was all combined into one for me. It has been such a great insight and quote for me. It has given me courage to be irrational in my life. So in KRC, I had sort of realized that, I like coding, and even in IIM, that sort of love remained because I could not really balance the balance sheet. So finance was not really my cup of tea. Uh, so that's how I ended up being in IT. And after a few years, it wasn't really the same for me. Something was missing. There was a feeling of emptiness. Maybe midlife hit me a bit earlier. Uh, and then I decided to do something about it. Not knowing what I'm passionate about was not helping at all. But then I also thought that there is this sector called social sector where people are not paid enough, but they are very passionate about what they do. So that sort of drove me into joining social sector. I joined a non-profit organization which was managing a youth leadership program. And for the next 4 years, I managed this program, and I learned a lot about myself and the transformation journey of individuals, because this program was a little intensive program. We used to select youth from all over the country, city based, and send them to a village where they lived for 1 year. And during this year, they worked with a rural NGO over there. So the transformation that's sort of I saw in that 1 year in those fellows has been a great learning for me. Uh, but again, this social sector engagement was something for me to figure out my passion. It wasn't that I was passionate about social sector per se. So after 4 years, I decided to take a year-long sabbatical, and I tried out different things. I started with Vipassana meditation, attended random seminars, tried out a few things, even conducted a couple of seminars. And after that 1 year, I learned three things. Firstly, I get satisfaction from helping others, especially in helping them take decisions. Secondly, I am not at all good in sales and marketing. And thirdly, with zero income, 1 year is a pretty long time. So with all these three learnings put together, I contacted two of my ex-colleagues, and together we started a consulting firm focusing on people side of business. Now, in order to increase our service offerings, I also designed and conducted a 2-day leadership workshop. Now, as part of this workshop, what we said was there will be a complimentary one-on-one session with me, wherein the participant can go into in details about finding what actually drives them. And one of these participants, after this one-on-one session, asked me to continue these sessions and coach him. That's how my journey as a coach started. But I don't really use the word coach a lot, simply because of the expectation. Whenever generally people hear the word coach, they have an expectation that this guy will just look at me and not only tell me my mistake, but also give me a solution. But it doesn't really work that way. you are unique, no one knows you better than you, and you are the only person in the world who can find the solution that is right for you. So the way I see it, my role is more of a catalyst. I just speed up the process without really becoming a part of this transformation journey. So that's why I prefer to use the word catalyst. Now, this is in a very sort of a summarized way my journey to where I am today. But there is, I have missed certain details from this, which I would like to point out. So, Bala, I would request you to please stop the recording.
Sure, just give me a moment, please.
Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay, thanks, Bala.
Yeah.
So if you're watching this video, I just told my story wherein I gave certain more details about the baggage that I've been carrying for many years. So the reason I gave these details was because whenever we hear someone else's story, it's, you know, the struggles also in some way glorify the protagonist. And we often don't get to experience uh, the hopelessness, the struggles, the helplessness of the person. And this was my attempt to recreate that in a short span of time. I don't know how good I was able to make you feel what my journey has been. But it is not always a good, glorifying, yeah, wonderful, wonderful thing. It's also about our demons. And so the reason I shared my story is maybe some of you have a story similar to mine, or maybe your situation was a lot worse than mine, but your story is quite upbeat. In either case, the bottom line is you are what your self-talk says you are. And with the type of self-talk I was having, you don't really have to guess how my life has had been at that time, KRC time, even IMC time, or even IT. So I joined IT after IMC. I'm not like, what really made me think that I'm not enjoying IT anymore. It could have been this self-talk. I'm not too sure. But I will tell you what I'm very sure of. That self-talk is very, very, very real. It is extremely difficult to see it as an illusion at that moment. So the obvious question is, what do we do then? How do we take care of our own self-talk? And before I answer that question, let's look at self-talk a bit technically. So self-talk is basically you verbalizing your thoughts. And so it's basically your thoughts. And there is something called emotion, and which are like two sides of the same coin. Whenever there is a thought, you will have an associated emotion. Whenever you have an emotion, there will always be an associated thought. You cannot really separate the two. And one other word which might come to your mind is feeling. Now, how are these three related? So scientists can actually measure emotion. And how do they measure it? They measure it by looking at your pupil dilation, your skin conductivity, your heart rate, your brain activity, your facial expression, and things like that. So it's all very physical. It's your physical body. When you try to convey this physical experience into words, it becomes feeling. So, but generally, we use emotion and feeling very interchangeably, and sometimes even thought and feeling. Like, I feel we have taken a wrong turn. What you actually want to say is, I think we have taken a wrong turn. So it's in some way we use them very interchangeably, but they are very distinct. And the problem is, so okay, now that you know how emotion is measured, you would also understand it is impossible to change your emotion. Now, how do you change your heart rate? How do you change your brain activity? At least we normal people can't. Maybe enlightened ones can, but we normal people can't. So now the only option left for us is to change our thought. Because if we don't change it, so thought leads to emotion, and emotion would sort of uh, create a similar low frequency memory associations, and you will think of other examples which give you a similar sort of an emotion, and this feeding off each other continues, and maybe possibly that is what leads to depression. My sort of understanding, I don't know anything about psychology, but this is just my interpretation. uh, and even if it doesn't really go there, I think at least psychosomatic diseases, if you have heard of them, they would definitely be because of this. So our thoughts become very critical, and at the same time, the key to change this entire world around us. So how do we really change our thoughts, a self-talk? What do we do? So essentially what is happening is you are labeling yourself negatively. So let me give one of the examples from my like coaching example. So I was coaching this person, and so generally I use the word he for the person who undergoes the coaching, so that privacy is sort of maintained. It could be a he, it could be she, we don't know. So when I was coaching this person, he said that when like he might be very stuck up with work, but he doesn't like to ask for help. And when we discussed like what would that make him feel, or what would that mean if he asked for help, he said that that would make me a needy person. And then we sort of discussed further, and eventually it came to this, that he wasn't with he wasn't very on a very good terms with his father. And if he had to describe his father, he would describe him as a needy person. So now do you see the logic? If I don't like my father, and if I see him as a needy person, the last thing I want to do is to be a needy person. And now if asking for help makes me think that I will become a needy person, I would never ever ask for help. Now, what do we do in this type of self-talk? So that was sort of the dark space where we are sort of stuck at. The very first ray of hope, a bright light, is be mindful. Can you catch yourself at that moment when you are thinking a label for yourself, whatever that might be? Can you be mindful and catch yourself thinking about that? Now that gives you an opportunity to stop this thought and start thinking of something else. And if you do it often enough, it will help you overcome this self-talk. So that's why you would have heard being mindful is very important. And if you want to take it a notch higher, then also think about past incidents in your life that contradict this label. So if your label is that I can't ask for help because that will make me a needy person, try to think of past instances where you have asked for help, and the person who is helping you has helped you immensely, or has not really thought low of you, or it has been very useful for you. So when you start creating this contrast, it helps you get over these labels sooner. So now if we sort of populate our framework, so this is what our updated framework looks like. And but if we sort of get into a positive self-talk, would that be enough? Of course not. The crux is to know what makes you really happy. And there are many ways in which we can slice and dice happiness factors. So over here I'm taking what we experience on a daily basis. So on a daily basis, how do we say that a person is happy, a person is laughing or smiling. And whenever a person is laughing or smiling, generally what is happening is the person is passively consuming whatever he or she finds funny. And that creates that laughter. So there is a huge spike in sort of energy, which makes you laugh. And because the spike is too steep, similarly steep manner, it comes down. So it's like a blip. It goes up, comes down. And it doesn't really last very long. Now, there is another type of sort of thing that gives us happiness or joy, which is, excitement or enthusiasm. When we are actively doing something, so doing something specific can make you very happy, especially if you're, let's say, in flow state, if you have heard. So doing something specific might give you the happiness, or being with that someone special can give you that happiness. So this is more sort of transient. It stays for a longer time. More emotions are involved. So it's more like, bingo, yeah, enthusiasm. There is another type of happiness, which is more serene, peaceful joy, where we actively do something for others. It could be for your friends, family, or society at large. So this giving gives us a very peaceful joy, very serene joy, and it sort of enhances your zero. It sort of increases it. It takes it one notch higher. So these are possibly the three ways in which we can think of happiness and the energy levels in each of these. Now, the important bit is that, it's not that one of this is more important than the other. It's a unique combination of these three different factors that really is the unique you. So the jigsaw puzzle for you to solve is find out what is the unique mix of you, and which becomes easier for you to sort of see with your self-awareness. So what is self-awareness? How clearly you see your own values, passions, aspirations, reactions, and what is the impact that you are creating on others. Now, this may seem pretty easy and straightforward. Just know my values and passions. But there are two things that really stop us from becoming self-aware. One is our own conditioning. So if our conditioning is that all the intelligent folks take up engineering or medical, how easy would it be for you to pursue English literature? Now, you might not even become aware that this conditioning has a role to play in the decision that you are taking. The other thing that comes in our way is comfort in numbers. So we are very comfortable with numbers and a bit jittery when we are alone. So let's say you are running late for a meeting with your boss. Now, of course, you're anxious, you're worried, your boss might take your case. And when you are sort of running towards your meeting, you see another colleague hurriedly coming. And you realize this colleague is also supposed to attend this meeting. Now, what happens? Suddenly, the anxiety and the worry is gone. There is someone else also who is late. So these two things put together really prevent us from becoming self-aware. So now, if we want to enhance our self-awareness, what do we do? So what the phase or the space you are in is, you don't know if the decision you have taken is right for you. You might be very sure of the decision. So for example, in one of my the person I was coaching, now he was extremely clear that he wanted to leave his job and do something of his own. Very clear. He had told everybody and he had worked out the details. This city, this is the work I will do, this is the type of money I need, everything he had worked out. And while interacting, we just sort of said that, the venture you are trying to do can be done even in the city you are. But this statement didn't really keep his excitement level high. And further discussions, we realized that though he was very clear that this is what he wanted to do, but this was all a means to get away from the city he was living in. You see, he didn't really like the city he was in. And therefore, to change his city, he was coming up with all this detailed plan to start something of his own so that he gets to leave the city that he was in. That is how blind we can be to our decisions or to different factors that are contributing to your decision. So what do we do? The very first step, bright light, is introspect. And now when we think of introspection, generally what we think is, why is this happening? Like, you tend to ask all these why questions. Why am I, always late for the meeting? Or it could even be, why do I procrastinate? Now, why questions don't really help a lot, because what happens is when you ask a why question, the answer that you get is always an excuse. So it's always a defensive answer. What generally helps is a what question. So what is the routine that you follow before the meetings that you end up being late in all the meetings or most of the meetings? So what is it, so in case of procrastination, what is it that you do when you delay what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to do something, you're delaying it, okay, wonderful. But what are you doing at that time? Asking these type of what questions allow you to know yourself a little bit more. But again, if you want to take it a notch higher, trust your emotions. See, when you're introspecting, there's so many thoughts floating around, it becomes confusing and it becomes a little, overwhelming for you to really figure out what is happening or what is the right solution. So in that scenario, trusting your emotions that, okay, when I'm thinking of this aspect, this is how I'm feeling. If I think this is the right answer, this is how I'm feeling. That would help you understand yourself better. Trust your emotions. So if we incorporate this bit also, so then this is our updated framework. So now we know what makes me happy, right? So now I can just run with it. End of the story, right? Well, not so easy. Why? Let's watch this video. This is a part of a TED Talk. I'm sure many of you would have seen this video, but we will be looking at it from a slightly different perspective. So do watch it, and we will not be really discussing in the context of this TED Talk.
Gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
So now, did you find this video funny? If you look at it very objectively, what is happening is there is someone who is being treated unfairly. And instead of empathizing, we were laughing, or we at least found it funny. Now that I pointed this out, how are you feeling? If you're feeling not so good about your behavior, you are judging yourself.
Oh my goodness.
How you behaved versus how you think you should have behaved. So can you just accept your behavior without getting into what you should have done. So how do we become more accepting? And another thing which is pretty important that comes from this video is it is extremely difficult not to compare with others. And probably this is the biggest reason of our unhappiness. Because someone somewhere is better off than you. And the thing that we need to be mindful of is you don't know the other person's entire story. Can you accept that trying to judge if your life is better or worse than someone else is futile? If this is something that you would at least like to work towards, then yeah, acceptance would really help you. The space that we are in is what I want to do, what I want to be, versus what I think I should do or shouldn't do. There is this should or shouldn't could be a moral call, ethical call, others' expectations of you, or maybe your own self-image. So one of the examples that I can think of is from a person, again, I was coaching, and this person was recently sort of promoted, got into a very senior role. His responsibilities changed drastically. And he was not enjoying his role. And therefore, possibly, the performance in that particular financial year was not so good. Now, he was in some way clear that he wanted to change the role. What role he wanted, that also he had decided that this is what is the role that would really make him come alive. But at the same time, how do I leave my present role at this point of time when things are not going good? What will people think of me? That the captain ran away when the ship was sinking. Now that's a very real dilemma. Now what do I do? And the way eventually it got resolved is he thought about the torture that he would have to bear if he continues for another year and try to turn things around and then get good results and then say, okay, I want a role change. Versus he approaches his management and says, I'm not enjoying this work. I want a change in my role, and then spend this 1 year in this new role and possibly give better results, and which would obviously help the organization as well. So that is the call that he took, and eventually he decided to change his role and not really wait for that 1 more year of torture. So the very first step that you can take is acknowledge the authentic you. Acknowledge that this is who you are, and then work from that space. And if you want to take it again a notch higher, ask rhetorical questions to yourself. Something like, am I wrong? Am I wrong if I put on my own oxygen mask first? So these type of rhetorical questions help you get over this conditioning or this social construct of what you should or shouldn't do. If we include this in our framework, so this is our updated framework. Now are we done? In some ways, we haven't even begun. Because unless you take a different set of actions, nothing will change. So only action creates change. So if I can sort of summarize the journey till now, we have done the designing bit, and now we have to roll with it. Now, whenever you think of change, one thing definitely comes to mind is change is difficult. But is it? Have you changed in the last decade? Have you changed in last year? Change is the most natural phenomenon, and it is quite easy, unless you want to change too much, too fast. Nature is always changing. We are always changing. If we follow the nature's law, change is very easy, very simple. and it is actually natural. The key is to form habits. Whatever new you want to sort of take up, how do I turn it into a habit? So the space that you generally are is, I know I need to do this, but somehow. And now this statement might make you wonder, I am now itself, I am in this stage, and whatever we discussed, after discussing all that also, if I am in this stage, then what were we discussing? There is one very big fundamental difference, and that is the acceptance of authentic you. When there is an acceptance of authentic you, your mindset changes, your thoughts change, and that brings about a very different type of thoughts, and it enables you to really go after what you want, because you know that this is the right decision. This is what is the right thing for you to do. So, just to bring out another story, I was coaching this person who was out of job, and so obviously his daily routine had gone for a toss, and he was struggling. An empty mind is a devil's workshop. He decided to do something about it. He liked nature, so he started going for treks. And over there, he met a few people who were into running. So he joined them and he started running. And he ran and ran and ran. So much so that he became an ultra marathoner from zero within 1 year. And even today, when he feels a bit low, he goes for a run. So he has found how he can sort of distract himself whenever he's feeling low. But how do I cultivate this type of habit? I'm sure we all have tried, going to gym or going for morning walk or going for running, and would have sort of failed. So the first step is be practical. If you have never ran for your life in your life, and you decide that the very first day, 1st Jan 2021, I will run 5 kilometers, that's again too much and too fast. Be practical. In this present moment, given my situations, whatever, family situations, my personal situations, this is the best I can do. And let's begin just with that. Maybe right now, the best that you can do is go for a walk for 5 minutes. Or maybe even one step before that. Maybe right now, the most practical step you can take is you will not snooze that alarm. Whenever you decide to wake up, you will put the alarm only at that time, and whenever the alarm rings, you will get up. You will not snooze the alarm. So whatever is the most practical choice for you, start with that. And if again you want to take a notch higher, the way to form habits is turn the source of your action from willpower to autopilot. So whenever we start, uh, willpower has a bigger role to play. We start because of willpower. So willpower, you will get up, put on your shoes and go for running the first day, next few days. But slowly it has to get into an autopilot mode. The sooner you are able to make this transition, you will form a habit. The longer it takes, the longer you have to rely on your willpower, you are increasing your chances of failure. So this is what now our updated framework looks like. So till now we had been discussing clarity in different forms. What about gratitude? We haven't really covered that bit. Is that not important? It is extremely important. This is one of those rare areas where spirituality and science meet. They agree with each other. So if you have heard about Eckhart Tolle, uh, let me just move this thing around. So appreciating the little things in your life creates a receptive state of consciousness for good things to come to you. Now, if you think that's too many big words and big mumbo jumbo and they don't mean anything, then I think words like Harvard and Berkeley would make sense to you. And the different researchers from these type of institutes say that when we practice gratitude, we are more happy, have better mental health, are more optimistic, feel better about our lives, have better relationships, improve motivation, have better sleep, and so on and so on. So whether you are sort of more of a spiritual person or more of a science person, you would see gratitude is a force to reckon with. And how do we then develop this gratitude? I think at the base of this dilemma, if there is this dilemma, is, are my results because of me, purely because of me? Or is there something beyond me that is contributing to my results? If the results are purely because of you, there is no need to thank anyone else. There is, like, literally everything is because of you. But if you think that someone beyond you, someone more than you, is also contributing to your results, you will feel gratitude automatically. So I don't have a direct story from one of my coaching conversations, but I would take up one story, uh, wherein I talked about that youth leadership program when I was in social sector. So when I was trying to find the fellows, so one of the fellows that I was interviewing, okay, over here I will make this exception and I will tell actually it was a she. The reason you will understand. So when I was interviewing her, she talked about her family, etc. I don't remember the question that I had asked, but her answer was, so right now I don't remember, maybe she had a sister or maybe not. She had her parents and of course her. Her father was bedridden since many years. And uh, obviously there were some financial challenges as well. What she answered to one of my questions was that even in this situation, they make it a point that their home atmosphere is happy. Now, she didn't use the word gratitude, but when I think of that family situation where the father is bedridden and there are financial challenges, it is it's very difficult to imagine a happy home atmosphere without the feeling of gratitude. So now how do we really develop gratitude, especially when things are not really going in our way? So just saying thank you doesn't really work. Gratitude is a feeling. If you want to experience the changes, all that research was talking about or what Eckhart was talking about, you have to feel that thankfulness. Unless that feeling arises, just saying thank you will not really help. And with this feeling, you need not actually say thank you to anybody. Just this feeling is good enough or is enough for you to bring about that change, all those changes that these research talk about. And again, if you want to take it a little bit one notch higher, what you can do is on any given day, or rather every day, what are the 3 things that I'm thankful for? What 3 things happened in the day that I'm thankful for? And if you can do this on a daily basis, again, remember our habits. So instead of willpower, get it into an autopilot mode. If you can do it as a habit, it can do wonders to your gratitude. And these need not be really big things. It could be very, very simple things. Maybe you are running late for a meeting and the car in front of you allowed you or made it easy for you to overtake this person. End of the day, when you're thinking about your day, you can be thankful to this person who allowed you to overtake so easily and you were able to reach your meeting on time. I'm thankful for that. So this completes our framework of happiness, and I would say that utilize it to enhance your happiness quotient. And just to take this one notch up, I would leave you with a thought. We all have two lives. The second one begins when we realize we have only one. Thank you.
Awesome. Great stuff, Madhukar.
छोड़ दिया
ओ भाई रुक
Thanks,
मत
thanks.
भाई मधुकर मधुकर
Yes,
रुक
sir.
मत भाई अभी बोलता रहे मेरे को अभी तो थोड़ा चमकने लगा है शायद
अरे तो so अभी सीजन 2 में थोड़ा टाइम लिमिट भी अभी आ रहा है.
अरे ऐसी
Try
कैसी
to-
टाइम लिमिट की जिसको जाना चाहिए
Today I'm grateful for Madhukar's session.
भाई साहब सॉलिड
Awesome. So we have a few questions, Madhukar, and the first one is from none other than Nitin Singhal, actually. So, okay, here we go. How do we know our answers to ourselves are correct?
As I said, trust your emotions. There is nothing else really to tell you what is the correct answer. No one else can tell you, firstly. It has to be you. And when we are thinking of different possible scenarios, we get really confused because of the multitude of thoughts. It gets overwhelming. So trusting your emotions, that if this is what I think I should be doing, what does it make me feel? Option B, if I do this, what are the emotions that are coming up? Option C, if I do this, what are the emotions that are coming up? So start trusting your emotions. That would be sort of my answer to the key to how to decide what really you should be doing.
Does that answer the question?
Does that answer your question?
I'm just worried about other people if I start trusting my emotions.
Sure.
I care about
so
people.
again,
Let's cycle
you started
through
judging yourself, Nitin.
Yeah, let's cycle through the other questions and then probably we can come back again, Nitin, if you have got anything more to ask. Okay, and others as well.
Sure.
So the second one is from Lokesh Garg. So he has two questions. I think they're both related. The first one is how to minimize self-bias while introspecting to make it more effective, and a follow-on question as well. How to deal with constructive feedback while trying to keep the feeling I am good. So the first one, I'll read again, right?
Yeah, please ask one by one. Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure. So how to minimize self-bias while introspecting to make it more effective. That's the first one.
Okay. So self-bias would generally come in to safeguard myself. That is when the bias would come in, right? So there is some evidence out there which shows me in not such a good light. And that is when my sort of, okay, so let me clarify here. So is bias meaning in terms of my own self or bias about others?
So his question is more around while introspecting, how do you minimize your self-bias and do the introspection objectively, I guess. Yeah.
Let him clarify. No, let him clarify himself what is the question.
Of course, yeah. Lokesh, if you're there. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, that's what Bala, I meant, that while you're introspecting, right? How do you basically introspect? I mean, to make sure that it's not biased, right? That you are kind of trying to ignore certain aspect which you should not while doing that introspection.
So I would say there are two things which can be sort of done on an immediate basis. So firstly, all this is understanding self or developing self. So these are all journeys. These all take time. It won't really happen snap of a finger. So how do we get started? So there are two things that really come to my mind. One is, again, this bias is coming in order to safeguard yourself. So be extra sort of cautious whenever you are trying to safeguard yourself. So whenever you are safeguarding yourself, trying to show yourself in at least acceptable light, know that a bias is working and how do I overcome it. So that is sort of one indicator that there's something that you are not looking into. And the second thing is avoid the why questions as much as possible. So your bias will kick in, especially if you ask a why question. Start more on the what questions, or what would I do instead, or what makes me happy, or what type of questions, or maybe how type of questions. So accept the way things are and look forward. So okay, maybe, so let's say in my journey I was carrying certain baggages. Now what do I do at this point in time? Okay, this is what I have been. Is this way of thinking helping me, serving me? Obviously not. So now I have to change. Now change to what? What do I want to see? And then start focusing on this rather than focusing on this negative aspect about me, or how do I overcome it. So wherever the attention goes, your energy also goes at the same place. So if you start focusing your attention on the negative aspects, or how do I overcome this negativity, so your energy all goes into that negativity. Instead of that, start looking forward. What do I want? I want this type of a result. How do I achieve that result? I am thinking that I am, let's say, ABC type of person, and ABC is not really a good thing. What do I do? So you can start thinking about what would I rather be? And if that rather be part is a DEF type of person, then wherever I am, this is the reality. From here, what can I do to move closer to DEF? And that would get you started. And one other thing which I would like to say is that many a times, or almost all the times, we have this habit of clarifying everything in our head. And once we think we are clear, then we will take action. And that many a times doesn't work, because the clarity also comes when we take actions. Just while thinking between your ears, you don't get the type of clarity that we aspire for. When we start taking certain steps, more things become clear. So it's like theory versus lab. We all do theory, वो सब ऊपर से जाता है. Until unless we start doing lab, hands-on really gives you certain ways of how do we proceed from here. So I hope I have sort of given you some ways to get started at least.
Yep. Thanks, Madhukar.
Most welcome.
Right. So the next one is from Anant. Madhukar, given your mindset today, what advice would you have given a young Madhukar?
What I just now said, that whatever is your reality today is what it is. You thinking otherwise is not going to change anything. So accept what is coming up in the present time, and start focusing on what do I actually want, and start moving towards that direction. Now, this is easier said than done. Being able to overcome your negativity, or the way you see yourself, the baggages that you carry, they are very real, and it's difficult to sort of drop these baggages. The ways are, as I said, being mindful. Catch yourself thinking negative about yourself. Catch at that moment. And at that moment, make it a habit that, okay, I realized. Many times you will not realize, which is okay. But at this moment, I just realized I was thinking bad or negative about me. Immediately switch to maybe start thinking of something positive, or better, start get into, so maybe you like playing with your kids. So whenever you catch yourself thinking negative about yourself, go and play with your kids. That will change your thoughts. So always try to catch whenever you're thinking negative about yourself, and change your thoughts. And whatever way that works for you to change your thoughts is the right way for you. So I hope that answers the question.
So how do I overcome procrastination, from Amit Rao?
Procrastination. So it can get into a coaching conversation actually. So firstly, what makes you think you procrastinate? And secondly, what is it that you don't like when you procrastinate? And we can get into so many other questions of similar type, wherein, so maybe so if this procrastination is not affecting you negatively, so let's say you have to do something in that particular time period, you didn't do it, and because of which you paid a fine. Now if those things are happening, then obviously there is some adverse things happening because of your procrastination. But if that is not happening, what really troubles you about procrastination? Everything is going fine. What's wrong with that?
Well,
So
it's,
there are these different things that we really need to look into, and many a times, so there is possibly, and I'm saying it in a very generic way, but there is possibly no one in this world who thinks I don't procrastinate. Still, the world is running. So many times, again, we have a benchmark that this is what I should be doing and this is what I shouldn't be doing. And that gets us into this comparison mode, and we start thinking about all these different scenarios which are possibly not even required. So I hope that gives you some ways in which you can think about your procrastination a little bit more and see what can be done, or is there a need to change anything firstly, and if yes, then what can be changed.
Does that answer your question, Amit?
yeah, like you said, it's a probably long conversation that I need to have with Madhukar, so we'll probably do it offline.
Yes, this would require a longer conversation. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, really, you need to work on your laziness. That's the problem.
Right. So the next one is from Nagesh Kamath. We always change, don't we? The question is, do we realize that we are changing? So that's a sort of a rhetoric one, I guess. Yeah. So
Yeah. Yes.
do you have anything to say about it? Yeah.
No, I think we are always changing. That's the most natural thing. It's, weather change. So everything is cyclical in this world. We are also, whatever goes up comes down, whatever goes down comes up. It has to change.
Right. Cool. So I think Virendra Mende, so he has a statement, or he was just thinking aloud. I think there is a question in it. So let me read out. How authentic you are, and how to be authentic and be practical at the same time. It's very difficult, he thinks. I think there's a question there.
Not really. See, authenticity is about being authentic with yourself. That is the most crucial part. Once you are authentic with yourself, that means you see yourself in the right light. If there is a certain bad aspect about you, yes, there is a bad aspect. You accept it. And if it is not really hurting you in a very big way, you live with it. Yeah, I am a human being. There are positive sides to me. There are negative sides to me. I cannot remove all my negativities. If I can do that, I will be a god. So there is this negative aspect to me. And if it is not hurting me so much that I want to change it, there is no need to. Can I accept this fact that yes, I have a negativity and I can live with it? That is being authentic with yourself, knowing about these different aspects. Now, how much of this do you convey to the other person is a different story. So being authentic is not at all difficult. How much of this you share, that really depends on the person. So I would sort of presently leave it over here, but yeah, so there would be, it's a spectrum, as we say. It's not a binary 1 or 0, it's a spectrum. How much, till what time, or till what level do you share and then you stop? It's all subjective.
So the next one is from Uma. What role has spirituality played in this transformation journey? What are your recommended practices?
So I have done tried to explore multiple spiritual practices. It started with Art of Living, then I did Vipassana, then I did even Sadhguru's Inner Engineering, and I have now also done pranic healing. So in that sense, I have possibly explored the major ones that are out there. I don't know the rest. Maybe there are many more. So spirituality definitely had a role to play. And I would answer, I think the best answer I can give you is when I went for Vipassana and when I came back, uh, uh, possibly just after a day, my wife told me, "You have changed." And for the better, of course. So that tells that, how much Vipassana meditation has an effect on me. So I am in that sense quite a spiritual person. So sorry, I've forgotten the question. Did I answer your question, or is there something else that you'd want to know?
Uma, if you're still there.
Or if you can repeat the question, Bala, I would just see if I have to add something else.
Yeah, I
That's
think
okay. We'll give her some time, and then if she so we've got one
Okay,
last
sure,
question,
sure.
and then maybe we can come back to Uma maybe. So
Okay.
this one is from the birthday boy, Pratap. Happy birthday, Pratap.
Happy birthday, Pratap.
Hey, thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.
Happy birthday, Pratap.
Right.
Thank you, both
So,
of them.
Can we see the birthday boy, or he's in birthday dress?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, can you see me?
yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah. So how do we develop the habit of living in the moment? That's from Pratap.
Let me put it slightly differently. What makes you think that living in the moment is the good thing? So again, what I'm trying to say essentially is that there are always certain questions to ask yourself so that you get a better understanding. So you would have heard about 5 whys, right? You keep asking why 5 times, and then you get to the root. In self-development, I try to avoid why, because we start giving excuses. But you can continue questioning in a different format. So that really gets you to the core. And if you really want to be in the moment, I would say that, in some ways that is actually being mindful. And until unless you are mindful, it is very difficult to be in the moment. You have to be always mindful. So the way I like to talk about introspection or even mindfulness is, you would have watched your marriage video. Now there is you on that TV screen, and there is you sitting on this chair looking at your own self. If you can develop this, from our engineering drawing, maybe a third angle projection or something of that sort, you start looking as if from a third person perspective. The more easily you are able to develop this practice, the more easy it will become for you to introspect or to be mindful. Because otherwise, our inner voice is always trying to safeguard the psychological me. The psychological me can never be hurt. There will always be a shield to save that. And we want to see through that shield. So for that, to be able to see it as if you are the third person watching yourself, that is the best way you can introspect or you can be in that moment, because then you are able to see what is going on within you, and of course the external world or the stimulus that is causing whatever it is causing within you. If you are able to see these aspects, it allows you, it really simplifies or eases the way you are able to be in the moment. So I hope again it is giving you an answer to how to proceed. All my answers would generally be about how to proceed. It's very difficult to have a very definite start and end, and this is it and done. That sort of thing doesn't happen much.
Yeah.
So any good ideas to teach gratitude to kids besides being an example from Pradeep Subudhi?
So that actually I do with my kids. So, there is an activity that we do as a family, and actually my kids now look forward to this activity more than anything else in the day, because at other times I might just tell them that I'm working and don't disturb me. But this activity time is sacrosanct. We always meet as a family, and in this activity, everybody, including me, my wife, and the kids, we all share what we learned during the day, and what are we thankful for, and what did we feel during the day. So I'm also trying to develop this uh, ability to express my emotion, which we feel we sort of we are not able to do it as easily or as properly. So these are some of the things that we discuss in our activity, and we call it activity, and that is what we do. So every day, so we do two things that we are thankful for what happened during the day.
How old your kids are, Madhukar?
My elder one is 11 years and my younger one is 7 years.
Very good. Excellent. When did you start this? After Upasana?
About, sorry, what did you say
Please,
in the end?
please.
I missed that.
When did you start this? Yeah.
This daily activity.
Daily, this gratitude.
I started this about a year back, I think.
Very good. Very good.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, so great. Amit, I'm going to come to your question at the end because you're asking for a summary there. So I'll come to that in the end. So let's get the other ones done before. So Kirti Thapa asks, how to be mindful if the past keeps on knocking?
The past will always keep on knocking. I think what latest sort of I read somewhere, I think Canadian University, Subudhi would know, they have said that we have around 6,000 thoughts every day. And some other studies say that most of them are repetitive. We sort of think of the same thing. So past thoughts. Okay, so there is one more thing. If you're talking about thoughts, so far we don't know, we as in whatever I have read, so the scientists don't know how do thoughts happen, how do they occur. We have no idea. If you look at it from a little spiritual perspective, spirituality talks about something called thought forms. So wherein we say that there are these thought forms that you generate and that are there in the atmosphere around you, and whenever the frequency matches, that thought comes and attaches to the mothership, which is you. So whatever frequency you are sort of displaying or emoting at that time, those type of thoughts will come and occur in your mind. So therefore, how you are feeling in many ways govern what thoughts occur to you. And if you're always in the past, see if there is any pattern. What are the thoughts about? Maybe that is something that you need to work on. Apart from, let's say, mindfulness and other things that I was talking about, this is something that you could try on separately, that if you could classify what are the thoughts that are coming to you. Maybe, again, they could be trying to save you psychologically, or maybe they are golden times of the past and you feel that you are stuck now and the past was so glorious. It could be any of those things. And what is really true for you, that in some way you'll have to first figure that bit out, and then we can talk about how do we proceed from there.
Great. Does that answer your question, Kirti? Thapa? Okay, so yeah, I think we have a very good closing question actually from Amit. So
Okay.
And we've done very well on time, actually. So for season 2, guys, so we aim to close the sessions, including Q&A, within 90 minutes. So I think we've done very well there. So the closing question from Amit is, can you give us a takeaway summary? Lots of good stuff in this presentation, but I feel like by tomorrow, I will forget everything. If you could take 2 minutes to summarize what you said again, it will help crystallize it for me in my memory. If others don't feel the same, I understand.
So I began by saying that being happy is a pretty straightforward thing. You identify what makes you happy and do only that, or at least more of that. So that is how I would sum it up, that your happiness is in your brain and your hands. It is within you. Now, how do you reach that within to identify what really makes you happy, and just you, and not catering to the conditioning and societal norms and all those things? Not those things, just you. Who is Amit? What makes him happy? If you can answer this bit, whatever the framework, etc., that I've talked about, it is basically aiding to this simple thing. Who is Amit? What makes him happy? And can you do just that?
Thank you.
Guys, so if any of you wants to hang around and talk to Madhukar, definitely, feel free. Yeah, so essentially we wanted to close the core of the session, including Q&A, within 90 minutes, but I'm happy to stay along. Madhukar has kindly offered as well. So yes.
I can. You have 3 more minutes.
Yes, we do. Yes, that is true. And yeah, there you go.
Well in time.
So Bala, I can stop here and then people can continue.
Yeah, the other thing, this is Umesh, the other thing that I have realized, especially in the last 3 to 4 years, where I had to kind of take a step back and reassess and kind of redirect myself, is that you need to drive clarity on a day-to-day basis. And, the question that Madhukar had posted, like, who is Amit? Like, if you have clear definition of that, that is one thing. How do you stay true to that definition and center yourself on a day-to-day basis without thinking about upsetting somebody else? You need to explain to them, be it your children, your wife, your mom, dad, siblings, whoever, but staying true to who you are without, or comfortable with your own skin, and then showing your character based on that and executing that on a day-to-day basis is not easy. But once you've developed that habit, I think people will start loving you and acknowledging you for what you are.
Very true, Umesh, very true. Thanks for sharing that.
Now, I love what you have done, Madhukar, not only for yourself, but people around you. You're contributing. Since I have gone through that path, I've gone to Vipassana. I've gone to somebody who can push me as a coach, right? I've gone through some coaching.
Okay.
What you're doing is great contribution. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madhukar, one more topic I wanted to bring and see what your thoughts are.
Sure.
So knowing what you are is also related to seeing the big picture of life. So since you've done Art of Living, inner engineering and all this, like I'll come back to the same question of Anant, like how do I know for us, it could be seeing the big picture right now, so that 20 years later, 10 years later, we say, okay, I think I had spent enough time to see the big picture and I'm decently satisfied with where I am. And then that also translates to how we can teach our kids to see the big picture and try to move towards the big picture, right? So how would you consider all of us doing that, trying to find out the big picture? How would you suggest?
Can you explain the big picture?
So it's like every time we, if I look back right now, I would say that probably I didn't see the big picture in life. So probably I would have done a lot of things differently 10 years back, 20 years back, right? So our goals and our ambitions are related to seeing this big picture and understanding who we are, right? How do we try to understand the big picture now so that we don't have those same feelings 10 years later, 20 years later? How do you advise your candidate clients about seeing that big picture and aligning your actions towards that?
So the way I would go about this is, when you say big picture, what does this big picture mean to you? Are you talking in terms of, as you said, goals and other things? But more important, I see the big picture as more of a direction. It's not really a very clean A4 or A3 image that is stuck and you're moving towards it. It's not at all very clear and crisp. It is actually extremely hazy. And to be able to develop this this objective or goal, at least in my opinion, that's where I come from. In my opinion, it neither works nor is it worthwhile. What definitely helps is you having a very clear sense of direction. So for, let's say, in my case, for me, the very clear sense of direction is that I get my satisfaction when I contribute to others and in a more thoughtful manner. So if I go and, let's say, so I worked in social sector, if I go and feed the hungry, yeah, I did this, does it make me happy? No, it doesn't make me happy. So my joy doesn't really come from feed the hungry. My joy comes from having these one-on-one discussions where this person is able to take a decision or do something which earlier he or she was not able to. That's where I derive my joy. And I'm extremely clear about this. And this is my direction. Now today, okay, so before I tell about this bit, once I had the opportunity to listen to Shaheen Mistry. She is the founder or the main person behind Teach for India. Now, when she was talking about, she said that believe in torchlight. What does it mean? That you might have decided that you want to go there, but it's completely dark. And the only thing you have is a torchlight. So you can only see your next step. And that next step could be forward, could be sideways, could be backwards. But you only know your next step so that you avoid that pitfall that is there on your road or on your path the next. And just keep your face towards that direction and keep moving. Sometimes you might have to take a detour, acknowledge that, accept that, know that you're taking a detour, and then again align yourself to that direction. So the way I see it is, very frankly, I didn't know about coaching till a few years back. Till the time that I was talking about, that person saying that, why don't you coach me? Till the time he asked me, I never believed I could coach someone. So when he asked me, that opportunity opened up for me. And right now, this is the space that I am in, that I can coach people, I can coach people to achieve what they want to do. That is where I am. And it is true for me today. Tomorrow, it might be something different. Day after, it could be something totally different. But what I know for sure, that my North Star is, in some ways or the other, I have to help the other person. So now, can you call it the big picture? Maybe yes, that, my big picture is, this is what I want to do. That is my North Star. What I do do today is based on my circumstances, my knowledge, my expertise, and what I am capable of doing today. Tomorrow it might be something very different. I don't know. I am with a torchlight. So I hope that sort of gives you my perspective of how I see things. But I always see that big picture or etc. as only as a direction, as a maybe a North Star. That's it.
That's a great answer.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions, guys? Or even stuff you want to just discuss, open thoughts or anything really.
Yeah, anything is fine. And if you want to share something or sort of help me understand things better, or you don't agree with me and you want to share your thought, that are also most welcome.
Madhukar, do you give like online coaching and all? Like
online? So yeah, coaching, if you really look at it, especially from the US perspective, it is over the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is on a weekly basis. I don't prescribe to that model. Weekly basis maybe works in the West when your goal is I'm a manager and I want to be the CEO or the VP. Maybe then that weekly coaching works. Otherwise, we are working on ourselves. It requires time. And therefore, my recommended frequency is probably monthly. Or if you are a very self-aware person, or you are able to find your answers a little bit more quickly, then we can move to fortnightly. But I don't like to have sessions more frequent than 15 days. Give yourself time. There is no need to sort of, we are not really running in a 100-meter sprint. It is a marathon. So let's take our time. And the session, personally, I like to have in person, but over call or over video call, over Zoom, etc. Nowadays, especially, everything works.
So this you take one-to-one sessions, or this is for a group of people?
No. So this is possibly one of the rare times when I'm interacting with a group. Otherwise, my sessions are always one-on-one, always. You will not tell about your thoughts in a group. You will not, right? As in anybody will not. So it has to be one-on-one if we want to make some progress, real progress.
Anyway, you give good discounts to us, we know. But otherwise, what are the charges like? If you can tell now, or you want to tell personally?
Yeah, well, before we proceed, Madhukar, just so I will stop the recording here. I should have done this a few minutes ago, but yeah,
thank you very much. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much for a great talk and everyone for the participation. And once I stop the recording, obviously we'll go ahead with the rest of the discussion.
Okay, and thank you everybody for taking time out and listening to me. Thank you.
Great.
This